Welcome to my basic Etie guide for Fire Emblem Engage. So Etie is one of the starting units you get in the game. She is an archer, and as soon as you get her, she is useful in that she can shoot down enemy flyers. She always has this kind of issue with durability in the early game, where her low defense and low speed kind of make her a liability. So some archers are fast enough to tank a hit. This archer is a glass cannon. Her damage output is reasonable. It's not horrible, but the fact that she's a glass cannon is something you have to play around. But aside from that, she is an I don't even want to say she's a decent unit. She's an okay unit. She's like if I'm being generous, low B tier. If I'm being honest, probably like a C tier unit. We'll go over why. So let's talk about her growth rates. This is important on any unit. Okay, so for growths, she has 45% health, 40% strength, 25% dex, 35% speed, 25% defense, 30% res, 25% luck, and 5% build. So in terms of bases, in terms of growth rates, her strength is definitely stand out. Her speed is low and her dex are low. Speed is important for doubling and avoiding getting doubled, and dex is important for landing accurate hits. Building dex over time is very useful, and it's something that a unit wants. Now, those are her bases, not including her starting class. So her starting class is Archer, so she gets plus 15% more strength, putting her at 55% strength growth. She gets 25% more dex, putting her at 50% dex. And then she gets plus 10% more speed, putting her at 45% speed. So her bases aren't like her base growth rates on top of her class aren't bad. She still is kind of like maybe average on speed, and her dex is actually decent, but that's really just from Archer carrying it. Now, when you promote her, she promotes into Sniper, and then you can second seal her into other things. So on Sniper, she does get 5% more dex, but weirdly enough, Sniper does not give more strength. It just gives plus 15% strength. So her strength growth is probably her biggest feature. Her dex growth is really all from her class. It's not really from her personally. And the 5% build is nice because on fixed growth mode, over time, 5% build growth will lead to plus 1 build over 20 level ups, which you will achieve on a unit you're mainlining, meaning a unit you're running the entire time. So this Etie was run up until chapter 14, and she's actually over leveled because I essentially fed her all of chapter 13 for kills. She killed both bosses and killed a ton of enemies, more enemies than she would kill under normal play. I used a special strategy where you do not break the junk on chapter 13, and she ended up killing way more enemies than she should, but she was a level 1 sniper before that. So arguably this is an over invested, like this is a hardcore, like super invested in Etie, and this is where she is at on chapter 14. So I'm pointing that out because it is definitely the case that some of these early game units like Alfred, Fram, Etie, who else? Vander, they have a hard time leveling up. They have a hard time accumulating stats. They have a hard time staying relevant as the game hands you new units that are just better statistically. Now, this unit, and any unit is viable, right? Like, you're better off running a unit than not running a unit in most situations. So if you're running this unit, it will help you in some ways. She's basically just an archer. I've been hearing different things about how to make her viable. Someone was saying reclass her to warrior. Her speed is very low. So what we should do really quick, let's change her to a lighter weapon. I'll put her on her lightest weapon, this killer bow. So this is a crit rate build where you go for the crit from the killer bow, upgraded plus an engraving, and also it stacks with no distractions. So you're just going for 1 rounds. Now it's not super consistent yet, and the killer bow probably needs upgraded more, and she definitely needs more crit. So she could be way more consistent. She's definitely less consistent than Alchrist. But aside from that, all right, so we've gone over pros and cons of the units, the growths. So the passive, that's definitely important. Energized. When unit recovers HP using an item, grants strength plus 2 for 1 turn. So this is okay. It's not the best thing. I don't think you get it for your next turn. I'm pretty sure you don't. I think it's just for that turn. So like you use it and then it's during enemy phase. And I think that's how it works because I'm fairly certain that's how Alfred's self-improver also works. Because for one turn, a turn, like, so when you use your turn and then you have an ability for one turn, the beginning of next turn counts as a new turn. So she should lose it. But it's not that particularly useful. And you also need to be damaged and then heal yourself. And she is a type of unit where if she gets attacked, she usually gets one rounded. She has low speed and low defensive stats. Most things will run one round her, if not all things. And things that don't one round her might even one hit her because she has low max health. So it's hard to even utilize this, let alone it's actually good. Like it's not good. It's just I'm just calling it out. I'm just letting you know. I'm just being honest about the unit. Okay, so level investment. In this case, I did like well above high level of investment to make her look good, and even then, she's still falling behind Tamara, Panette, and Marin, who I just got for free and have way better stats out of the gate. So there's that. Okay, best classes for the unit. So let's go to change class. So the first thing she gets on is Sniper. It's hard to say that she would be a good halberdier. I mean, this kind of works around her bad speed, so she would be okay on this. Now, looking at these stats, I don't feel too comfortable recommending you putting on halberdier. Consider this is a level 6 sniper switching over to halberdier. So she's not even like just a level 1 advanced class. She has had a few level ups and had some stat increases. And 10 defense, 13 speed, she's still going to get doubled in one rounded. It's not going to fix her durability issues. So putting her on the front line is probably a terrible idea. But theoretically, you might be able to make her a halberdier. Someone said put her on warrior and that fixes her problem, but you can plainly see that it does not. All it does is it slightly increases her build, her health. It does increase her strength and give her merciless, which makes her more consistent if she's going to be hitting broken foes because it gives her more bonus damage. In terms of shooting things down, both sniper and warrior probably one shot. Most flying units, excluding wyverns, who tend to be on the tankier side. The speed on warrior is like, it's not that the speed is bad on warrior, it's just that her speed in particular is bad. And look at the defensive stats on that. 8 defense on chapter 14. She's not surviving a hit. She's getting one rounded even on warrior. This does not fix her. This is an over-invested unit that I've run the entire time, and these are her stats. Now I'm calling that out because I know there are going to be people who love this unit and who swear by this unit for whatever reason, but like statistically, the numbers just aren't there. And I have nothing against this unit, but it's going to be difficult to make her viable. You're going to have to really go out of your way. Like I literally went out of my way to power level her, and even then her stats are still really bad. So this is a key feature of this unit. So warrior could be an option. She does have access to silver bow on it, so she could do that, longbow and silver bow. Sniper for crits. So the crit on sniper build thing is legit. You get crit plus 10 as long as you're shooting things that don't counterattack. And, that's easy to achieve. So sniper, warrior, maybe halberdier if you're feeling adventurous, but that's probably going to end up in her dying constantly, so I can't reasonably recommend that. Bow Knight, I like this because of the speed. The careful aim is whatever. Like, you would use this, I think, for the speed. I think the speed is nice on Bow Knight. The speed and the mobility, it lets her be a little bit more flexible. So if she was on like Canter, her downside of being one rounded by everything would be a little bit more manageable because of the mobility plus a Canter on her. But I would say Canter Warrior, Canter Bow Knight, Canter Sniper. So Sniper for crits, Warrior for consistency, Bow Knight for mobility. I would say those are probably her best classes. Throwing her on armor, honestly, it does fix her durability problems. Because, General just has like high armor stat. It's kind of a meme though, but theoretically it fixes her durability problems. So you could put her on General and Great Knight. She's always going to have speed issues. So you could run these, but I would say you just want her on bows. You want her on Bow Knight, Sniper, Warrior. And maybe some other weird things. Let me see. So faster classes are interesting on her. So 17 base speed. Griffin Knight is so exceptional. She actually might be a good Griffin Knight, the more I think about it. But no, let me rephrase that. She would be an okay Griffin Knight. She wouldn't be like a good Griffin Knight, because Griffin Knight will fix her horrible speed, and also it gets her a little bit of defense, and it also helps her res, so now she at least doesn't get one rounded by mages. But the speed increase prevents her from getting doubled, and her strength growth of 40% on Griffin Knight would, you'd add 10 from the Griffin Knight, she'd be at 50% strength growth, 55% speed. She would be like an acceptable Griffin Knight that could not one round things. You're also throwing out bows to put her on Griffin Knight, but she could be like a healer. She could attack things. She's probably not going to be killing things consistently, but that's kind of like the theme of the unit, to be honest. Like, the only things she will be consistently killing would be enemy flying units on bows, to be honest. And she might be contributing to chip damage. So yeah, I think it's all bows. She doesn't have like the base. She doesn't have the base stats, and she doesn't have the growths for a lot of flexibility. She can't be a mage. She can't be like, some kind of melee weapon user very effectively. This is with overinvestment. These are what her stats are. Keep that in mind. This is me using the unit from the beginning of the game until chapter 14, which is right now, deployed every single time, killing things every single map. No other units were given special treatment or even fed stat boosters. And to prove that, boom. Here's some stat boosters I haven't used. So a lot of these starter units do have trouble, and this is definitely one of them. So I actually don't recommend running her. If you really like this unit, if you really like the character, go for it. But just understand that pretty much no matter what you do, she's going to level up slow. She is going to have low speed. She is going to have low defensive stats. And she generally will get one-rounded by almost every single enemy in the game. Very few units have to worry about that. Like, tanks usually have to worry about, like, mages. Things that, like, mages usually have to worry about physical, but they can tank magic. Usually things can tank something. This unit can't tank almost anything in the entire game. And the only way that you could get her to be tanky is to reclass her into something with more bulk. But the classes she's best on, which are bow classes, she will remain frail. This is an over-leveled Etie that I leveled up 5 times in a single level by feeding her like half the map. Literally feeding her half the map in XP. Literal definition of unit favoritism. And even then, she's still way behind other units. So I cannot stress that enough. The other thing too, look at this SP. She starts off with low SP. So she has a hard time unlocking things. So she has no passives right now because SP is directly tied to XP gain. So as you gain XP and have an emblem ring equipped, you gain the most amount of SP. Her being on an emblem ring right now doesn't even make sense because she can't make good use of it, arguably. So she's generally not going to be prioritized in terms of SP generation. That being said, she's not going to hit 1k SP very effectively. She's going to have a hard time hitting 1k SP. So even if you wanted to run like Cantor on her, you would have to wait until you get Sigurd Ring back, which is at the end of chapter 17, I believe. So by that time, she's just kind of sitting on no equipped skills. Like, this is the brutal realities of running this unit, or these are the brutal realities of running this unit. Now, you could equip like Sigurd on her early, which would be really weird. Like in the early game, you'd have to take it off of one of your damage carries and use it on her to generate SP on her. But like you really have to go out of your way to dump investment into this unit. And for like early game passives, if you can get Cantor on her early, you should, I would say, because her low defensive stats mean that if you accidentally park her within enemy range, she will die. And the only case that isn't true is if she's in trees and she gets lucky and dodges because she is a covert. But outside of that, Alchrist is just like statistically better. He has better speed. He has better defensive stats. He has more health. He's more consistent. His personal class with Luna is super consistent and really reliable. And especially if you have him use a Brave Bow, he's absolutely insane. So then you get him shortly after you get her. So honestly, I think she's just overshadowed by Alchrist. And she has this negative feature where she easily dies Uh, Not even to bad positioning, just to like the slightest miscalculation, she can't tank anything. So she puts more pressure on you to position her perfectly for no advantage because she's not even better than other archers. So there's really just this like annoying feature about her where you're just always worried about some stupid enemy getting through, you accidentally moving extra tile over, and now she's within enemy range, and that enemy guaranteed will kill her. Other units can tank the hit and it doesn't matter. So it kind of forces you to be super precise with her positioning and never put her in a bad position literally ever. And on some of these maps, especially going into endgame, that's very hard to do. Some of these maps are very demanding, like in the end of the middle game, unless you really know what you're doing with advanced tactics. So it's a lot of pressure, to be honest, for a unit to run. And I think that's a real downside of this unit that needs to be addressed. So for upgrades, crit bow, you get a killer bow from Fagato. You can take it from him, put the Lin engraving on it to give it increased crit, and then on sniper she can be a crit build. If you want to be a warrior, you can upgrade a longbow and just have her shoot things and be a ranged backup. That could be decent. That's probably her best average use case. And then like the bow knight thing is whatever. You can run that if you want. The other good thing about warrior is she does have access to silver bow, so she can still one-shot most enemy flyers. That's probably her best use case, but honestly, most units on warrior can achieve this exact same thing, but they just have better base stats. So it's unfortunate. Not all the characters are perfectly balanced. You know, there's nothing we can really do about it unless they update the game, which they could do if they wanted to. Like they could tweak some stats, like give her better defensive stats or speed or something. Honestly, what I would like them to do is just make her speed higher, her base speed, and I think she would be fine. But right now she's at like a C tier, maybe even a D tier in terms of like how much investment is required, and the payoff is not worth it at all. It's like like imagine investing in Jean, but then the reward is that you get a bad unit. That's literally what happens. And this is without DLC. Now with DLC, you can fix her stats a little bit. You know, Tiki is the ultimate fixer of stats. You throw Tiki on her early, it improves her level ups and her average stats, and eventually she'll become like usable. But yeah, she's almost always a liability, and I don't recommend running her at all. You can just understand the risk, like just understand what you're agreeing to when you run this unit. You're agreeing to a frail unit who can shoot things down, which any archer can, but you don't get any advantages for dumping resources into her, and she probably will fall behind the pack. I overinvested in her, and she's already fallen behind the pack on Chapter 14. So I can only imagine if you're just using her normally, shooting down flyers, that she falls behind the pack, you know, well before Chapter 14, and it just gets worse as Endgame rolls in, because Endgame is very punishing, and enemies in Endgame are extremely fast, and her low dex doesn't matter as much early game, but as you hit endgame, things are insane. So like, she's been over leveled. Her dex is 19. Chimera's dex is 18 currently on Picket. Marin has 20 base dex, 19 dex. So 19 dex on an axe unit. So that's what she's like. I've just been handed this unit. I didn't even level it up yet. Like she's 19 dex base. Kagetsu 23 base dex. He's 19 dex. So with overinvestment, her dex is just hitting other people's bases. That's a very sobering thing, because dex seriously matters when you're shooting things like enemy flyers. Enemy wyverns can be fast. Fast enemies have high avoid. High avoid means it's hard for her to hit. So very late game, she's going to have a hard time consistently hitting enemy wyverns, which is like her sole job, and enemy griffin knights. Enemy griffin knights are some of the fastest enemies in the game, and they tend to be the hardest to hit. So her low dex will make her not very functional at fulfilling her role, which is basically shooting down flyers. So her low dex is a liability in terms of just like reliably hitting flyers. You want units with high dex. Another advantage of Alchrist is that he has 70% dex growth and base high dex. So the dude scales perfectly into the end game and just can consistently shoot down flyers. And also he gets Luna, he gets faster speed, he can double enemy wyverns in most cases. And he can also do things like Brave Bow to double enemy Pegasuses. and falcons, which are faster, to proc a Luna and then ignore their armor. So he has more to him, and he is more available. He's more accurate. He's more durable. He's literally just everything she does but better, like in terms of statistics. And it's hard to ignore that when evaluating this unit. And it's honestly hard to recommend running her. I would say use her if you want to do a challenge, because you're gonna have a hell of a time. You know, it puts extra pressure on you. We'll just leave it at that. It just puts extra pressure on you. And then yeah, so upgrade longbow, upgrade killer bow, upgrade silver bow. But yeah, late middle game to late game, she's gonna have problems with accuracy. She's gonna have problems with damage. You know, there's so many things that are gonna go wrong with this unit that you're gonna have to patch her up with like stat boosters to keep her viable. And that's really all I can say about her. Yeah, heavy investment. Best classes I'd say are bow classes. As for which is better, warrior. Really, I would say it's a fight between warrior and sniper. Sniper for the crits. It's up to you. Like if you prefer killer bow strats, like she can get her crit rate to like, I don't know, 60 to 75%, which is decent. It's not the most consistent thing. I would rather just be able to shoot things with base damage and guaranteed kill them with high accuracy, but 70% crit rate isn't bad. And then for warrior, I think warrior is probably the strongest route. It's the most consistent. It also has higher base damage. It also is a backup, and I would rather have a backup than a covert that gets one-rounded by everything. So let's just check out warrior's stats one final time before we send her off. And I'll probably never use this unit again, if I'm being honest. She really struggled to secure kills, deal damage. She was hitting like 5s on these enemies in the previous chapter. It was, well, with like a silver bow. It was not fun. All right, so her on warrior, she gets 22 strength. So that definitely helps her damage out. She gets a little bit more speed. She also gets more build. Honestly, warrior is probably her best class. I think warrior with like a silver bow, and I wouldn't get too crazy and have her use axes, because look at those defensive stats. She's getting one-rounded by everything still, so you want to keep her away from enemies. I would get Cancer on her and just put her on warrior and call it a day. But yeah, that's it for this one. It's unfortunate, but this is the way the game is. So definitely like and subscribe if you enjoyed this. The other unit guides are going to be more useful. This is more of like making the unit as good as you can with the circumstances surrounding the unit. Definitely drop a comment if you have some kind of clever way on Maddening no DLC to level her up effectively or use her effectively. I literally fed her kills and had her shoot down as many flyers as I possibly could. And even then, she ends up under-leveled with low stats. This is fixed growth mode, so there's zero randomness in the level ups. So, in terms of progression, she just doesn't have the stat increases, even with being overfed. So it's kind of wild. But yeah, thanks for checking this out. Peace.